The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, released in 2019 for Nintendo Switch, is a remake of the 1993 Game Boy title and subsequent 1998 Game Boy Color update of the same name, essentially taking that whole game and updating it with a new graphical style, an orchestrated soundtrack, and improved gameplay to take advantage of all this new tech. Not only did the game get a facelift, but there's also a bunch of stuff added to flesh the game out further, or at the very least give the players some more stuff to do. So while everybody else was getting goo-goo-eyed over the brand spanking new Breath of the Wild game that was all kinds of amazing, Link's Awakening was the game that caught my eye. Yes, it's a remake of a game that I've played countless times before, to which I say, so what? That game was awesome, and so it only made sense to make a version that's more awesome and, well, mission accomplished. Let's get that out of the way. So after covering the two Game Boy versions of Link's Awakening in prior videos, I don't think we need to do a deep dive on the story for the third straight video. The short version, you're on an island, you need 8 instruments to wake up a fish to escape, find all the gimmicks that get him going along the way, all the usual Zelda stuff, blah 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 blah. The overall premise of the game remains the same. A lot of the layout in regards to the overworld maps, the dungeons, caves, and whatnots are more or less as it was on the old Game Boy. You're getting a lot of the same tools, the same subquests, little things here and there. If you bear any familiarity with Link's Awakening on Game Boy, or the DX version on Game Boy Color, then you already have a firm grasp on what to expect from this Switch interpretation. It's more or less the same thing. That having been said, Link's Awakening on Switch might be similar to the Game Boy original, but it also adds a hell of a lot more to the overall package. The biggest and most obvious update to Link's Awakening is control, primarily due to the fact that you now have a controller with many more buttons to play with rather than what you were given on the old GB. No longer are you swapping swords and shields for other items, now you have a button to swing your sword, a button to pick stuff up, a trigger for your shield blocks, and a trigger for dashing once you have acquired the Pegasus boots. Your X and Y buttons operate whatever items you have assigned to your 2 item slots as you maintain that bit of customization. Movement is done entirely with the left analog stick, making the D-pad almost useless, save for selecting items in a menu or such. It takes a little getting used to, but it does work, and you do have some control over Link's speed, nudging the stick for small steps being a thing that you could do here. Another notable update is that there's actual scrolling in the overworld as well as some of the dungeon levels. Originally, progress was made with screen-to-screen transitions, moving from screen to screen when you move to the edge of said screen, similar to how it worked in the original Zelda on NES. Some stages still do this, but mostly in dungeons where you're entering new rooms and such. Link's Awakening is retreading old territory. You may have more buttons to work with, you may have shinier graphics, a big orchestra behind the music, and also the little vocal bits. No actual words, just grunts and stuff and But underneath all that stuff, in the broadest sense, this is the same game people have played on the Game Boy in 1993. The story and the plot progression plays out as it did back then. The overworld and dungeons have retained as much of their original layout, and a good majority of hidden items are still in their usual places. So anyone who is familiar with the old version will have some idea on what to do in the remake, because it's mostly the same stuff. I say mostly because they did add a few things. The number of heart container pieces and secret seashells have increased considerably to take advantage of your slightly more expanded skill set. There's about 50-ish seashells to uncover compared to the original's 20-ish, and you'll need at least 40 of them to earn that level 2 sword. Some of these seashells can be found in the same spots, others require a bit more thought to be uncovered, and then there's a small number earned by partaking in the various minigames, which have a little more purpose to them beyond the 1 or 2 cursory pickups. Of course, with the expanded seashell count, you get additional gifts at the seashell stores for passing certain milestones, including a rather helpful seashell scanner that will ping you whenever a shell might be close by. It's actually quite useful. Get all the seashells, all 50-ish, and you get... I don't know, I never got all 50. All I ever wanted was the sword. From there, nothing else mattered. Until I got the boomerang. then nothing else mattered. You get like a chamber stone or something, hardly a worthy prize for a tall order, but I digress. Link's Awakening also brings back the bottles that can be used to capture fairies, so you can use them at a later time. There's about 3 bottles to be won or found. The shield plays more of a role in combat, as you'll need it to block attacks that will sometimes result in an opening for you to strike back. Playing Mambo's Mambo will bring up a map that will let you warp to any warp point you've discovered up to that point, rather than just that one pond or the beginning of a dungeon, as was the case in the original game. Rapid Rides now has a time trial option. You could try and clear the track as quickly as possible to earn a prize, and you can actually use the hookshot here, which increases your chances of getting as many rewards as possible during the regular Rapid Rides ride. Some puzzles actually make sense now, like those chest knight pieces that you're tossing around to make upright to open doors. Before it was random bullshit. Now you have to get them on the designated slots, and the knight pieces behave as they did in Idiot's Chess, so you pretty much have to follow the rules of chess, and yeah. There's also amiibo support, which I don't support, so we don't mention it here other than the 5 seconds that we mentioned it. The only new, arguably significant, and debatably worthwhile addition to the remake is Damp's Shack, which replaces the camera shop of the DX version. This is essentially your dungeon maker of sorts, where you use single-screen chambers to build your dungeon. As you venture through more dungeons in the main quest, you'll have more chambers to play with, and even Damp will award you with new chambers and goodies if you manage to complete his challenges, which usually entail building dungeons under certain conditions. The chambers aren't flexible, however. Each one has a fixed number of doors and fixed positions. The type varies between regular, shutters, locked, and bombable entries depending on the chamber, and some chambers even have stairs that you'll need to connect with a passage, and the passage is randomized, as well as treasure chests, which will first contain any small keys required for any locked doors in the dungeon. The final chest will always contain the nightmare key required to open the boss chamber, and anything in between will be varying rupee prizes that carry over to the main quest, which is something. Now eventually you unlock the ability to create dungeons freely, as well as some additional challenges that will net you a whole bunch of rupees as a reward, which is something, I guess. I suppose it's nice that I could rack up thousands of rupees instead of being stuck in the triple digits, but then you'll have to wonder what's even the point, since the most expensive item in the game is the 980 rupee bow that you eventually have to get. Even the shovel can be bought back from the Garaya after you make the big trade for a couple hundred rupees. So, I don't know, maybe that's a bit excessive, or maybe that's the new Nintendo, or whatever. Listen, Damp's Shack is the closest you're going to get to an official Zelda Dungeon Maker gimmick, and it's alright, I guess. I mean, for a lark, it's okay, but I don't know. I'd call this a tease, but I find it limiting, trivial, and somewhat pointless. Your mileage may vary in this regard, but when you dabble in stuff like Super Mario Maker, Mega Man Maker, Doom Builder, the Zelda Classic Z Quest functionality, hell, even the old level creators built into some of the early NES games like Wrecking Crew or Excitebike seem more flexible than this thing does. Again, some people won't mind this, and that's fine. This is something that, I don't know. Fortunately, the shack plays a small part in a much larger adventure, which again is retreading old territory, but with enough changes, tweaks, and additions to make it feel like a makeover. The improved controls certainly work wonders with this version. The improved fighting mechanics spices things up in the combat portions of the game. The expanded heart piece and seashell count does a fair job of refreshing a familiar piece of business, and holy Sheeta, there's actual blue rupees dropped in the field worth 5 rupees of the it's about goddamn time. No more grinding for 1 rupee at a time, Jesus Christ. Also, less annoying text boxes pop up for common things. They'll pop up if you decide to check things, but that's about as far as it goes. And thank fuck for that. Is there more that they could have done beyond copy-paste, new coat of paint rearrange here and there? Perhaps. I'll admit I kind of wish they did add a little more to it beyond, you know, more plastic toys to buy in real life to open up some stuff, I guess. A second quest / master quest type thing where they rearranged some stuff and gave you entirely new dungeons to play with would have been a nice addition, not to mention would have helped to justify the $60 price tag, which I'm sure some people were miffed by initially when it came out with that pricing. There's a harder difficulty mode that doubles damage or something to that extent, but it's not the same thing, and it's kinda lame in comparison. But what's done here is done exceptionally well, and it's a game that I've gone back to several times over the past couple of years, so it's doing something right in my book at least. Link's Awakening is a wonderful looking game, bookended by animated openings and endings. It's basically tiny figurines moving about this giant, intricately designed miniature island set with a tilted overhead perspective, and I really adore this. The characters are smallish yet extremely expressive and impressionable. Their animations and reactions are just wonderful. The various monsters, and particularly some of the bosses, kind of look cute as well. The surrounding land itself has a bit of a plasticky look to it, but that's part of the overall charm, I think. It's a visual style that's not going to appeal to everyone, but I think fits nicely with this dream world setting. Performance in general is fairly decent, though it's not perfect. There are occasional moments where the game would suffer from very noticeable frame drops, and this usually comes every so often without any real rhyme or reason. It's not a total game killer, but it does break the immersion, for lack of a better term, of an otherwise smooth playing game. Beyond that, I like the look of the game. It's something different and charming and cute and stuff. The sound, of course, has seen a substantial upgrade. Sound effects are naturally more livelier and punchier, sounding like actual things, like sword swings, explosions. You have familiar jingles recreated with a bit of charm. There's the aforementioned vocal grunts added that actually do add to the expressiveness of the various characters, and to be fair, I prefer this over the constant Mamma Mia's or whatever of the Marios. To the surprise of virtually nobody, of course, we went from chiptunes to an orchestra for the music, and results are varied, I will say that much. Not in a bad way. There are some tunes that have greatly benefited from the upgrade. Tal Heights have a couple variations, and they sound appropriately dramatically adventurous and heroic. The main overworld theme is another take on the main overworld theme, and it's kind of soothing to a certain degree. I do like the Mysterious Woods theme sounding mysterious, actually. The dungeon themes vary from amazing to kinda sorta there. There are some tunes that sound too similar to the old tunes, most of the tunes that play inside houses and stuff, for example. And then there's the one custom dungeon theme, which is a new track that sounds rather lame. I kinda wish I had the option to choose other dungeon themes to serenade a player in my custom things that I can only share locally and through those aforementioned plastic toys that I refuse to support. Overall, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on Nintendo Switch is a good reimagining of the original Link's Awakening on Game Boy, striking that sweet spot between retaining the core aspects of the source material and providing enough changes and tweaks to make it somewhat different enough to experience once more. It's not going to replace your vintage editions, nor should it, because the original versions, classic or color, still hold up in their own way, but this Switch remake of Link's Awakening is superb and wonderful. Definitely worth checking out if you like your vintage Zeldas with a more modern flair or something to that extent. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. 998 down, 2 more to go. Could hardly believe it myself, and yeah, it's gonna be something. Later.